Early life of Jesse James. Jesse Woodson. James was born on September 5, 1847 in Kearney, Missouri, to Robert and Zerelda James. His early life was marked by hardship and instability, starting with his father's death when Jesse was just a child. Raised in the turbulent period following the Civil War, Jesse's early years were marked by a lack of formal education and a strong family orientation. His mother, Zerelda, would go on to be a crucial figure in his life, supporting his ventures in adulthood. The rural conditions of his youth in Missouri shaped his character and sense of survival. These formative experiences set the stage for Jesse's future, one that would be shaped by rebellion, lawlessness, and a deep sense of loyalty to those he cared about. Jesse's youth was further complicated by the political instability of the times. Missouri was a divided state during the Civil War, and young Jesse was influenced by Confederate ideals. His experiences as a young boy during the war would shape his identity and lead him to take up arms in a bloody conflict that would ultimately shape the rest of his life. Civil War influence on Jesse James. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, would have a lasting impact on Jesse James. At the age of just 16, Jesse joined a group of Confederate guerrillas known as William Quantrill's Raiders. These men, fighting for the Southern cause, engaged in brutal hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and acts of terror against Union sympathizers. As a young man, Jesse was deeply influenced by the harsh conditions of the war, which exposed him to violence and the lawlessness that would characterize his future. During the war, Jesse was involved in raids and skirmishes that caused significant destruction to both civilian and military targets. The war's chaos gave rise to many Confederate irregulars who continued their lawless behavior even after the war ended, and Jesse was no exception. His time as a guerrilla fighter hardened him, and the brutality of the war left an indelible mark on his psyche. It was this period that ignited his lifelong contempt for authority and the law, setting him on a path that would eventually make him one of America's most infamous outlaws. Post-Civil War life and transition to crime. After the end of the Civil War in 1865, the South was devastated, and Jesse James found himself in a country struggling to rebuild. The Confederacy had lost, and the Union forces occupied the South. Jesse's bitterness toward the government and its authorities grew, especially as many of his former comrades struggled to survive in a rapidly changing world. The James family was in financial trouble, and Jesse, now a young adult, turned to a life of crime as a means to survive. In the years that followed the war, Jesse and his brother Frank James began to rob local banks and trains. Their criminal actions were seen by some as a form of rebellion against the growing industrialization of the country and the power of banks and railroads. For Jesse, these robberies were not just a means to an end, but a way to challenge the power structure he despised. They targeted institutions that symbolized the Northern economic power that had helped defeat the South. Thus, Jesse's criminal activities became entwined with a sense of Southern pride and resistance, which fueled his legend as both an outlaw and a folk hero. Formation of the James Younger Gang. As Jesse James's reputation grew, so did the strength of his criminal activities. By 1868, he formed the James Younger Gang with his brother Frank, along with the Younger brothers, including Cole, Jim, and John Younger. Together, they carried out a series of highly organized robberies across Missouri and other Midwestern states. The gang would rob banks, stagecoaches, and trains, often with precision and planning that made them difficult to apprehend. The James Younger Gang became infamous for their boldness and daring tactics. One of their most famous robberies took place in Northfield, Minnesota, where the gang attempted to rob a bank, only to be confronted by armed citizens. Despite their failed attempt, the event added to their growing notoriety. This period in Jesse's life marked the peak of his criminal career, as he grew more violent and reckless, determined to build his name as one of the most feared outlaws in the country. Bank robberies and train heists. Jesse James and his gang gained significant fame for their daring train robberies and bank heists. One of the most infamous of these was the Rock Island Railroad robbery in 1873, which involved stealing a huge sum of money and valuables from a moving train. Jesse was known for his meticulous planning and his ability to outsmart local law enforcement. His gang's heists were often executed with such efficiency that they left authorities scrambling to catch them. Jesse was not just interested in wealth. He saw his robberies as an act of defiance against the system, which he believed had betrayed the South. His outlaw persona became synonymous with rebellion. The robberies were a way for him to exact revenge on the institutions that had once oppressed his people during and after the Civil War. The fact that Jesse James could pull off these heists with such success only added to his mythic status as an outlaw and a folk hero. Jesse James as a folk hero. In the years following his criminal exploits, Jesse James became a cultural icon, particularly in the southern United States. Many people viewed him as a symbol of resistance against the government, seeing his robberies as a form of rebellion against the powerful industrialists, railroads, and banks that represented the North. Some even compared him to Robin Hood, a figure who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Jesse's image as a folk hero was fueled by stories that portrayed him as a man of honor and courage. He was often described as someone who helped those in need, using the spoils of his robberies to support his community. In reality, however, Jesse James was a ruthless criminal, but his actions were often romanticized by the public. His legendary status grew, and he became a subject of fascination in books, newspapers, and later, films. Public perception and media influence. The media played a significant role in shaping Jesse James's image. Newspapers across the country followed his criminal career with fascination, publishing exaggerated accounts of his exploits. While the Northern press depicted him as a dangerous and violent criminal, Southern publications often portrayed him as a hero who was standing up for the rights of the common man. The conflicting views of Jesse James reflected the divisions within the country at the time. In Missouri and other Southern states, he was seen as a freedom fighter who resisted Northern oppression. However, in the North, he was viewed as a menace who needed to be captured and brought to justice. This media portrayal only added to his mystique and helped ensure his place in the cultural memory of the American West. Jesse James and the younger brothers. The younger brothers, Cole, Jim, and John, were some of the most loyal members of Jesse James's gang. They were recruited by Jesse after the Civil War and played pivotal roles in many of the gang's robberies. Cole Younger, in particular, became a key member of the James Younger gang, known for his calm demeanor and cold-blooded approach to robbery. The bond between Jesse and the younger brothers was strong, rooted in shared experiences of the Civil War and the struggles they faced in post-war America. However, as the gang's criminal activities escalated, tensions within the group began to grow. The younger brothers, while fiercely loyal to Jesse, were not immune to the law's pressure, and their arrests and betrayals would eventually mark the beginning of the gang's downfall. The Northfield Raid and its aftermath. The Northfield Raid in 1876 was one of the most infamous events in Jesse James's criminal career. The gang attempted to rob the First National Bank in Northfield, Minnesota, but the plan quickly fell apart when local citizens fought back. The robbers were met with gunfire and a chaotic shootout ensued. Several gang members were killed, and Jesse and his brother Frank barely escaped with their lives. The raid's failure was a turning point for Jesse James. It exposed vulnerabilities in the gang's operations and marked the beginning of the gang's disbandment. The aftermath of the raid left many members captured or killed, and Jesse James's status as a feared outlaw began to wane. However, the Northfield raid remained one of the most significant events in Jesse's life, contributing to his legendary status and the myth surrounding his name. Jesse James in hiding. After the failure of the Northfield raid, Jesse James went into hiding. He and his brother Frank, along with a few remaining members of the gang, spent the next few years in isolation, evading the law. Jesse became a reclusive figure, constantly moving from place to place to avoid capture. During this time, Jesse was forced to live in the shadows, relying on a network of loyal supporters who provided him with shelter and supplies. His isolation only fueled the myth of Jesse James as a mysterious and almost invincible figure. Despite the law's best efforts, Jesse was able to evade capture for several years, adding to his legendary status. The betrayal by Robert Ford. In the spring of 1882, Jesse James's life came to a tragic end, largely due to the betrayal by one of his own gang members. Robert Ford, who had joined the gang only a few years earlier, was offered a reward for Jesse's capture by Missouri's governor. Ford, seeking the reward and eager to gain favor with authorities, decided to betray Jesse. On April 3, 1882, Ford shot Jesse James in the back of the head as Jesse was adjusting a picture on the wall of his home. The murder was shocking to many, as it came not from a lawman, but from someone who had once been part of Jesse's inner circle. Ford's betrayal ended the life of one of America's most infamous outlaws, but it also marked the end of an era in the outlaw culture of the American West. The public reaction to Jesse James's death. The death of Jesse James shocked the nation. His murder at the hands of Robert Ford led to mixed reactions. In Missouri and the South, many people mourned his death, seeing it as the end of an era. They viewed him as a hero who had fought against the oppression of the Union forces and had resisted the rise of industrial capitalism. For these supporters, his death was a tragic loss. In contrast, in the North, Jesse's death was celebrated as justice served. Lawmen and politicians saw his demise as the end of a dangerous criminal who had evaded capture for too long. The media played a significant role in shaping public opinion, with some portraying Ford as a hero for bringing down the infamous outlaw, while others saw him as a coward for betraying his former comrade. Jesse James's burial and legacy. After his death, Jesse James was buried in Kearney, Missouri, at the family farm. His grave became a site of pilgrimage for those who admired him, and his legacy began to grow even after his passing. Over the years, various monuments and statues were erected in his honor. His life became a subject of fascination, leading to books, films, and songs that kept his legend alive. Jesse's legacy was complex. He was simultaneously viewed as a hero and a villain, depending on one's perspective. To many in the South, he was a symbol of resistance against Northern oppression, while to others, he was simply a criminal who used violence to achieve his goals. Regardless of one's opinion, Jesse James's story became an enduring part of American folklore. The myth of Jesse James. Jesse James was more than just an outlaw. He became a mythic figure in American history. His criminal activities, combined with his personal charisma and the romanticism surrounding his life, made him the subject of numerous legends. The story of Jesse James has been told in countless books, movies, and songs, ensuring that his name would never fade from public memory. Over the years, the line between the real Jesse James and the mythical figure became blurred. In some accounts, he was portrayed as a Robin Hood-like figure, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. In others, he was shown as a ruthless criminal who had no regard for human life. The many conflicting portrayals of Jesse James have contributed to his enduring status as an icon of the American West. The James family and their role in his legacy. The James family played an integral role in shaping Jesse James's life and ultimately his legacy. Jesse's mother, Zerelda, was fiercely supportive of him throughout his life, even after his criminal activities began. She would often defend him in public, viewing him as a victim of the system, particularly in the post-Civil War South. Zerelda, who had also lost her first husband, never remarried and was deeply committed to her children. Her influence on Jesse cannot be overstated, as she shaped his views on loyalty and resistance. Jesse's brother, Frank James, was also an important figure in the gang and in his personal life. Frank and Jesse were inseparable throughout much of their criminal careers, often seen together in their robberies and escapes. After Jesse's death, Frank James went on to live a quieter life and was eventually pardoned by the governor of Missouri. Frank's later life was less dramatic, but his involvement in his brother's life ensured that the James name would remain prominent in the history of the American West. The impact of Jesse James on outlaw culture. Jesse James became a defining figure in outlaw culture. His audacious crimes, his ability to evade the law, and his eventual betrayal by Robert Ford ensured that he would become an archetype for the Western outlaw. Many later outlaws, including Billy the Kid, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid, were often compared to Jesse James. His story set the stage for future outlaws who would attempt to emulate his daring, rebellious spirit. Jesse's image as a man of defiance against authority became a part of American folklore, often blurring the lines between right and wrong. For many, especially in the South, he represented a sense of defiance against the Northern forces that had occupied the South during Reconstruction. His outlaw persona would influence generations of rebels who found themselves on the wrong side of the law, but believed their actions were justified. This deep connection to the ideal of rebellion and the lawlessness of the West became the hallmark of Jesse James's legacy. The role of Jesse James in shaping Western mythology. Jesse James's life and actions helped shape the mythology of the American West. His story became a central element in the narrative of the West, where rugged individuals fought against the powerful forces of government, law, and corporate interests. His legendary robberies, dramatic escapes, and eventual death contributed to the romanticized view of the West as a place of untamed freedom and adventure. The West was often portrayed as a land of opportunity, where ordinary men could rise to prominence through strength, wit, and courage. Jesse James embodied this ideal to many people, and his actions helped fuel the perception of the West as a place of lawlessness and rebellion. The outlaw's journey was seen as a battle between individual freedom and societal control. Through his criminal activities, Jesse became a symbol of defiance, showing that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one could resist authority and make a name for oneself. The legacy in popular culture. Jesse James's impact on popular culture is immeasurable. His life and death have been depicted in countless books, movies, TV shows, and songs. Some portray him as a cold-blooded criminal, while others romanticize him as a misunderstood hero. His story has been interpreted and reinterpreted over the years, with new generations of filmmakers and writers adding their own interpretations to his legend. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Jesse James was the subject of numerous penny dreadfuls serialized novels, and dime novels, which helped build the myth of his outlaw exploits. The Western film genre later took up his story, with famous portrayals by actors like Tyrone Power and Brad Pitt in films like Jesse James, 1939, and The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, 2007. These films and others cemented his status as one of the most iconic outlaws in American history. Today, Jesse James remains a fixture in the collective imagination, a symbol of rebellion and defiance in the face of authority. The influence of Jesse James on modern outlaws. Jesse James's legacy has influenced modern outlaws and criminals, particularly those who reject societal norms and laws. In many ways, his story has become a blueprint for individuals who feel oppressed by the system and turn to crime as a form of resistance. The idea of anti-heroes in popular culture, where protagonists break the law for personal or ideological reasons, owes much to figures like Jesse James. In the 20th and 21st centuries, individuals who have committed high-profile crimes sometimes draw comparisons to Jesse James, as they too become symbols of rebellion or resistance. While modern criminals may not share Jesse's Southern roots or post-Civil War context, they often resonate with the same themes of outsider status, defiance, and rebellion against authority. Jesse James's life, thus, continues to inspire and shape how criminals are portrayed in popular culture and media. The enduring legacy of Jesse James. Jesse James's legacy endures as one of the most iconic and controversial figures in American history. Over the years, his story has been passed down through generations, capturing the imagination of those fascinated by his criminal exploits, his defiance, and his dramatic life. From his early years as a Confederate guerrilla to his final moments at the hands of Robert Ford, Jesse James became a symbol of both resistance and lawlessness in a time of political and social upheaval. Though he may have been a criminal, his story speaks to the larger themes of the American experience: the quest for identity, the clash between authority and individual freedom, and the mythology of the Wild West. Jesse James's life continues to be an enduring symbol of rebellion, and his influence on the American imagination shows no sign of fading. As long as the tale of the American outlaw endures, Jesse James will remain one of its most compelling figures, representing both the allure and the dangers of a life lived on the edge of society.